USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, February 19th, 2020. This episode is brought to you by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, on Monday, the news that has been awaited for several months was made that there is going to be a new commissioner this April in Hockey East.
And we're welcoming in now the next commissioner. He will be the fifth commissioner in Hockey East history. He's currently the deputy athletic director at the University of New Hampshire. He's also the chair of the men's Division I men's ice hockey committee. That's Steve Metcalf. Steve, first off, congratulations. Obviously it's a very historic league, Hockey East, to be able to be a part of, but now to lead this great conference. It has to be something that makes you quite proud.
Yes, it does. And thanks very much for having me on, both you guys. And it's great to talk with you. I know you both love college hockey so much, and that's a passion we all three of us share. I couldn't be more excited. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with the league. And like you said, the great history in Hockey East and championships and Hobie Bakers and Patty Kazmaiers and all that stuff. But super excited to get started and work with the institutions and do everything I can to make the league the best it can be.
I want you to, if you will, take me through the process a little bit. I know when it was announced that Joe Bertagna would not be retained as commissioner, I think you were one of the first people I reached out to, and I said, "Hey, are you applying for commissioner?" And you told me at that time to call the Vermont athletic director. He was running the search. You didn't have any comment. You almost seemed like you wanted to pass it off. Obviously, maybe doing the right thing. But from the beginning, was this something you wanted to consider, or was it something as the application process drew near that you decided, let's put my hat in the ring for this? This is something that I believe I would like to do.
Well, I think, right from the onset, it was, I guess the thought was in the back of my mind, and several people from within the league, approached me and said, "Hey, this is something you should think about. We think it'd be great." And, just let it percolate a little while. And so, it got to be the fall, I guess, and the process began. And, the process began, and I formally got involved, I guess, late in the year, 2019, although it seems like so long ago now. I have to tell you guys, like, I got, the deeper I got into the process, the more excited I got, because obviously I had some familiarity with the subject matter, and, but just diving into it and having more conversations, it just made me more excited about the opportunity and being involved in a great league, but also some of the things that I might tweak and or build on the great foundation that Joe Bertagna, has built over the last 20 plus years.
Drew Maricello, the athletic director at Boston University and the chair of the executive committee, yesterday when talking to the media, kind of outlined the process, and he said that there were 60 or so applicants, about 40 that they immediately considered, and then they weeded it down to 9. But there were a couple of rounds of interviews, at least 2, maybe even 3. As you're going through those interviews, and I know you had some inside knowledge having been around the league, but what did you find were the objectives that some of the administrators, whether it be coaches, athletic directors, other administrators from the athletic side of each school, were laying forward? And what do they seem to want to get out of their next commissioner? Because I mentioned on the call yesterday, you don't get rid of a 23-year veteran like Bertagna without him, basically, he didn't retire from his job. He was forced out, and that means that there's some unhappiness. So what did you get in terms of the feeling of what these people want as their next commissioner?
Well, so I guess let me answer this in 2 parts. So the first part, you're right. There was, multiple layers in the interview process. And I guess, first of all, from my perspective, I think my answers and my vision, if you will, became a little more refined the deeper I got into it. And, I was refining that also based on some of the, questions I was getting, questions about, how we do scheduling and television and branding and how we can promote our league. And so, those were some of the themes that I, heard loud and clear that were important, but they're also, ones that I had, thoughts and perspectives on. And, I think when we got to the last round of interviews, I got asked a myriad of questions, all those I just noted, but many, many more. And, I felt, comfortable in my responses. And in some cases, I think it's building on something we've already doing. And in some cases, it's, there's going to be a focus on doing more in some categories than others. And, how can we, I guess, take the next step with like Hockey 2.0, whatever you want to call it. And, I want to be clear, like, I think there was a really, really good foundation built and the league has had a lot of success under Joe. But, there'll be some things that I'll be wanting to do. We're in the first year of a new TV contract, for example. And so, we're getting some real revenue from television that the league hasn't had before. And this year, next year will be year number 2. And we'll be renegotiating or beginning the process on the next deal. And obviously our hope will be to get a bigger or better deal that has a bigger reach that recognizes more revenue for the league. And, so some of those things, a natural things that I as a new commissioner will be involved in, but, I think real opportunities for the league as we go forward.
You're going to walk into a league that every fan in the league knows that TV is obviously one, and TV and streaming is one issue. But the other two that always seem to crop up among Hockey East fans is, when are we going to 3-on-3 overtime? And when are we going to get a 12th team? You hear those questions so often. I know I do, just writing about the league from fans. So I'll give you a chance to kind of get onto each of those topics. But do you have some opinions about both overtime and maybe the expansion to cancel out an unbalanced schedule?
So let me. Yes, I'll be happy to touch on both of those, and at least one of these I think we talked about yesterday. But the overtime situation in college hockey, as I said yesterday, I think shame on us, and I mean college hockey, for putting ourselves in the position we are currently in, where we have different formats for different leagues in different parts of the country. And this couldn't be any more confusing. And for even educated college hockey folks, never mind the fans going to the games, to not know exactly what each league is doing is just, it doesn't make any sense at all. Do I think that it's likely that we'll go to a different format in overtime that involves them 3-on-3? Yes, I do. I think the coaches are warming to that idea across the country, and I've seen them warming to it over the last couple of years. And so every 2 years, the rule book is open for changes, and this is a year that's open. And so good timing for that discussion, I think, to come to a head. And then there's a relationship between that and what we do with the RPI and, the kind of statistical component that, my committee deals with for, selections and we're the folks that make adjustments to that. And so I think the two go hand in hand. So I think that's important to note that, changes in the format and changes in the RPI, they are, linked in this regard. And, both those committees need to work in unison as we go through this process. And I'm very confident that we will. The chair of the Rules Committee is Wayne Dean, who's a friend of mine. And, we know how important the dialogue will be between the two groups on this issue. And, I think that dialogue to some degree has already started, but it really come to a head when we get, right before Naples, when we're talking with all the leagues and commissioners. And then when we get to Naples, and then we go into the summer meetings in June. And that's, the timeline, I think, for making decisions. So an important subject a subject that we have to get on the same page. That's just an absolute non-negotiable for me. And I do think it's likely that the format will change and will hopefully change for everyone. So we're all doing the same thing. On to the league schedule and the imbalance and the 12 team. I think Hockey East needs to look at the unbalanced schedule. And, this will be something that we'll talk about, with the coaches and administrators, over the next couple months, but it'll all come to a head when we're all down together in Naples and talk about this. But, I think this is something, there's multiple solutions. Obviously, some folks gravitate towards a 12 team, to have an even number of teams, that's one way to do it. But, there are other ways to do it as well. And, we could play less league games, obviously, and that would be another way to fix the balance. Or, we could, look at some kind of hybrid model where we, play an unbalanced number of games, but how those games get scheduled and who they're against, perhaps we're doing that in a different way. So I think there are more options other than just adding a 12 team. And, those are the options that I'll be bringing to folks to talk about over the next couple months.
More with Steve Metcalf in a moment. First, this word from our sponsor, the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Every time you show up, every time you make your presence heard, whether you clap your hands or stomp your feet, lead the chant or join the chorus. However you choose to be a fan, you make the game. The NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 to get your tickets today.
Our guest is Steve Metcalf. In April, he'll become the 5th commissioner of Hockey East. Your chairmanship of the Men's D1 Ice Hockey Committee for the last several years has given you a pretty good view of the national scene in college hockey. And one of the things we've often talked about on our program and at other times in writing and so forth at USCHO is kind of the difference between cooperation and collaboration among the conferences. All the commissioners have told us they have a tremendous level of cooperation, but is there room for more collaboration? For example, in finding maybe one streaming platform for all the leagues as national interest in college hockey has grown and people are less parochial and regional, or in other ways to help support each other within the sport?
So I don't know that I could answer that question other than to say yes, probably, but I couldn't. At this point, I couldn't go into any specifics. But let me say right up front, I think obviously I know all the commissioners and some of them I know quite well, and I've been getting messages from them, trading messages, voicemails, texts, and emails over the last 48 hours with all the commissioners. And, hockey, by its nature, it's just not that big a sport like, soccer, volleyball, basketball, which has, so many more institutions competing. And so I think that's one of the great things about college hockey, the relative size and the relationships that, most likely folks have across all leagues. And so I guess what I would hope to be doing in our league is, taking some best practices, if you will, from around the country and, applying that to what we do and sharing the best practices that we do with others. And, I think ideas that, we'd like to implement in our league at our member institutions, Josh implementing those out in the NCHC, like, if it's a good idea for college hockey and it's a good idea to, grow attendance at the arenas, like, let's all try and do it. And that's the way I look at it. And, I do know that is a fairly close group. They stay in regular communication with each other. And like I said, it's all folks I know. And, I look forward to collaborating with all of them.
Kind of along those lines, something that I know Joe Britannia has mentioned, Bob DiGregorio and Atlantic Hockey has mentioned, is a desire, and it may be very difficult or impossible to attain within the NCAA, but have more of a federation or kind of a vertical within the NCAA for hockey, so that things that are different about hockey, such as being drafted before college, maybe 20-year-old freshmen, things like that, some of those rules can be adapted more for hockey. Is that anything that you've given some thought to? And, as somebody with experience across different sports, is that something that's even workable?
I think there are probably some, there is probably enough meat on the bone to, talk about some of those concepts, but let me specifically draw out one. I have heard discussion about is there a way we could do officiating more, I guess I'll just use the word nationally as opposed to league by league, always trying to find, as much consistency as possible in what we do. I think if you ask coaches, they would undoubtedly say that they want the best officials, or they would have a complaint about an official, but they also, I think on the heels of that, would say they want consistency. And, sometimes obviously there's a population of folks that, think the officiating in general should be better. But, you often hear complaints about consistency, or I do too. And I think that's just a really important point. And you shouldn't have a situation where, if a team from Hockey East is playing at home and then the next night they're playing in Alaska, and you've got a different set of, standards or points of emphasis, or, whatever it may be, where the game is not consistently called. And then never mind if you extrapolate that into a tournament and, has some impact on you. Could be positive or negative, I guess. But, I guess that's an example of some conversations that I've heard. And, I think I don't know what that exactly would equate to, but it's certainly worth having that conversation.
One of the things that you're going to end up being involved in with the discussions among the different conference commissioners is the change with the teams leaving the WCHA and now renovating the CCHA name. It seems we've gotten back to a situation we were in the late 2000s, where we were running out of room for new teams, and maybe putting some teams at risk, as for example, as the CHA went away. Now we're going to be in a position where perhaps we'll have 3 teams left without chairs when the music stops, and still looking for a place for Arizona State. So I guess the question is, do you see a kind of an ideal landscape for league size and how many conferences that are needed? And is there even perhaps a need for looking down the road in a few years at some realignment?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that. I understand the desire of those teams that left, and they're starting, bringing back the CCHA, which is, I think it's, I love the CCHA, the name and who they were. So I think that's great. But, leaving those teams that didn't, get the invite, so to speak, puts them in a little bit of peril. And that worries me. Just if I'm looking at this broadly, and never mind, the Arizona State guys who, I think have done a great job out there with their team and their program, and they're having some success, and, but haven't been able to find the league home, which I know, they desperately want. And, I think it would be for all those teams without the league. It is, we need to try and find a place for all of them where they can live, because I think it's the best thing to do for college hockey. But but again, I also understand why, schools are, thinking about this, and just to put a league back together that's so, geographically tight or relatively tight, you can understand it. But I worry about college hockey when we've got some teams out there that don't have a home. And, I worry about all of us in general in the sport, trying to help them find a home.
I want to ask you perhaps an easier and more short-term question. What is it about becoming Hockey East Commissioner that you're most looking forward to?
I love the folks in the league, the people in the league. I think we've got some excellent coaches. I mean, really, really top shelf coaches in our league, both on the men's and women's side. And, some of the administrators, obviously, I've known for a long time because I've been sitting next to them at these meetings. And it's a group of colleagues which I enjoy working with. So, working with people that on a subject matter that you feel like you have a good knowledge base on, that's really exciting. But I always say when I meet with student athletes at UNH is that, I want them to be as successful as possible in a multitude of different ways. And my job is to try and help them do that. And that's exactly what the message I'll be giving to, student athletes and the coaches in Hockey East. Like, I want to help you be as successful as possible. And, knowing some of the folks involved, I think they will make it more rewarding when they do have the success that I know they will. Look, and I just looked at the pairwise and stuff today, and on the women's side, obviously we've got a couple of good teams, but we've got one team that's just absolutely having a fabulous year in Northeastern, and they've got some really big time players. And I think when you're going to win a championship, you need to have a couple of elite players on your team, and they have that. And then on the men's side, perhaps not a team in the top 3 or 4 or 5, but a deep roster of teams that I don't remember off the top of my head how many are on the inside right now, but a number of teams. And a coach in our league today, forecast to me that going to Hockey East playoffs, I mean, on the men's side, so much parity right now that you've got teams that could finish from anywhere from 1st to 8th or 9th, with 3 weeks to go in the season. And that he predicted, and he felt very strongly about his prediction that, a team that played on the road in the first round would be at the Garden for sure this year, because that's how much parity and that's how deep we are. And so, when you've got multiple teams in the mix, that's certainly exciting at this time of year. But to answer your question, working with the people and the coaches and, celebrating some successes with them, that's going to be the part I look forward to the most.
We're talking with Steve Metcalf. We've mentioned that he is going to be the next commissioner of Hockey East, but currently still the chair of the Men's Division I Ice Hockey Committee. And Steve, I'll let you turn your attention away from your future league into your current responsibility. Detroit is only, I believe it's 50 days away from today, will be the Frozen Four. What are we looking forward to the most about Detroit? Obviously, every year, each city brings its own spice, if you will, to what they can add. But it's been 10 years since we've been to Detroit. A lot has changed. What is the committee probably most excited about for this Frozen Four?
So can chili dogs be my answer? Does that work?
That's okay.
So let me say a couple things about Detroit. I think, obviously, you should go and watch the Frozen Four. I think it's a premier, top shelf, exciting championship, and obviously we're going to crown a national champion. So that's really significant, and it's a championship I've always enjoyed. Never mind my role or my participation or whatever it may be. But so I've been to Detroit. I haven't been to Detroit for a long time until I went a couple months ago, and I'm here to tell you guys I was impressed. If you're, downtown by the river and, where some of the major hotels are, and I forget the name of the street, but, kind of the main street, if you will, going through downtown that goes from that Cub on the water all the way up through Ford Field, through the ballpark, up to Little Caesars Arena. That whole area, you wouldn't even recognize that area from 10 years ago. And, it's really like a sports fan heaven. All you've got in between that area is, bars and restaurants, and with a heavy sports theme. You've got some of the Motown, music and theaters and whatnot. And then you get to Little Caesars Arena. And, I'm here to tell you that arena is absolutely spectacular. You will not find a nicer place with more bells and whistles. Obviously, it has the advantage that they knew. But we went to a game there, and Detroit wasn't doing so well in the game, but I was happy they scored at least one goal because they got to, shoot off the fireworks and turn on the projection and the video board and all the bells and whistles that they have. But the arena itself is absolutely spectacular. And so as far as putting on a show for the fans and the teams, I'd be hard-pressed to think anyone's going to outdo what they can do there. But it just got so many tools in their toolbox. And then Coney Dog. So I said to everyone there, what is the iconic food? I went to Buffalo a year ago and I ate a bunch of buffalo wings. I mean, absolutely fabulous, top shelf buffalo wings. What am I going to eat in Detroit? And they said Coney Dogs. And, and their version is a chili dog with, I think, onions and cheese on it. And so I said, let's go get them. And take me to the two best places that you have in town, and I'll decide which is best. So, of course, the two best places are right next to each other, and they're bitter rivals, I assume. So we went and had some Coney Dogs at one place, and we walked right next door, and we went and had some more Coney Dogs. And so it was great. And I said, is this what they do in Detroit? This is what, both places were packed with people doing the same thing I was doing. So when I see you guys in Detroit, how about we go get some Coney Dogs?
I think that's a great idea. And
you're on.
This is almost reminding me of 2014 in Philadelphia with the Battle of the Cheesesteaks. So I'm happy to test out the Battle of a Coney Dog. That sounds like something that could add interest, but also extra inches to the waistline, which I always seem to go for.
Look, let me just tell you, last year, the very first night we got to Buffalo with all the NCAA staff, and I said, they said, where are you going to go? I said, let's go. We're going to go get some wings. And so we go to the restaurant, and they say, Gabriel's Gate, by the way, best wings anywhere, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I was with a bunch of people, and the waitress came over, and everyone's like, look at the menu. I go, put the menus away. There's only two things we need here: wings, and bring a plate of poutine, and then we're good. And everyone put the menus away. So they put the menus away. The waitress went, and she delivered exactly what I asked for, and that's all we ate: poutine and wings, and we ate it for probably about 2 hours straight.
Well, there is a men's ice hockey chair who takes control, and
that's right.
I think that is a great way to end this here, Steve. We obviously look forward to working with you as we get closer to the NCAA championships. We'll probably talk to you on Selection Sunday, and then obviously see you in Detroit. But then, most importantly, we look forward to working with you as the next commissioner of Hockey East. And again, we congratulate you on that accomplishment, and can't wait to watch you work your magic in this league.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for having me on.
That's Steve Metcalf, soon to be new commissioner of Hockey East. Jim, we've always enjoyed talking with Steve in the past. He's always been very transparent and thoughtful. And back when the announcement was made that this would be the last year for Joe Bertagna as the commissioner of Hockey East, Steve's name was one of them that we mentioned.
He was one of the first names that came to mind for me, mostly because of the work that he has done with the NCAA Men's Ice Hockey Committee of recent years. And I think that has been well received by the national body of college hockey. I think every coach and administrator that deals with him understands how professional he is. So I think I had him on my radar screen among some others, but he was one of those that, and I mentioned it in there, that I called him, right when it was announced that the job would be open. He was coy. He didn't really want to talk too much about it to me, but he seems like he is one of those guys who is a very good fit for a role like this.
Certainly the things that have been done in conferences like the NCHC are on the radar for every conference. And when you hear Steve Metcalf talk about best practices, I'm sure there are some that he could borrow from that conference.
There's no doubt about that. And, you go back to when this job opened up, and people around the league were telling me that, there has to be something done to improve on what Joe Bertagna, who was with the league for 23 years, did. And I don't want to take anything away from Joe, but obviously there was a desire to make a change. So I think one of the number one things that I think Steve Metcalf will have to do is build on what's there, but also kind of separate himself and make sure that he doesn't repeat just ad nauseum. He does have to kind of look at best practices. But at the same time, I really hope that people around the league, whether it's coaches, administrators, athletic directors, even fans, don't try to judge Steve Metcalf based on somebody like Josh Fenton. You heard a lot about Josh Fenton in this process. You know, we'd love to find the next Josh Fenton. And listen, Josh Fenton has done a great thing for the NCHC, and obviously their on-ice success then bolsters a commissioner's reputation. But what you have to look at is Steve Metcalf in a vacuum in a way, because he's got to go out and become his own commissioner. He can't try to emulate directly what Josh Fenton is or who he is. He's just not the same person. They're very different personalities. But I do believe there's a lot of upside to a man like Steve Metcalf. He knows the sport. He is, as Drew Maricello called him yesterday, a great connector. He has the ability to bring people together. His network is very strong. So I believe that there will be a lot of positives that come out of the future, but I don't think it's fair to try to make him live up to the reputation of somebody that's very different and somebody that's not him.
The one thing that I'll point to from the NCHC that they've been successful in recently that would be great to see in Hockey East is building that brand reputation. From what I understand, the early days of Hockey East was very much about the Hockey East brand, as it was a new league trying to be like the Big East. But and in past years, it's been more about the different schools. And I think if he's able to put some more luster and shine on Hockey East as a brand, that'll go a long way in building the reputation and the visibility of the conference.
Yes, I agree with you there. I think that the 11 schools on the men's side, you had Holy Cross on the women's side, so 12 schools total, they really have to be out there and be chest beaters about Hockey East first and foremost. Then promote your program. You have to build this conference up. And I think if that's what you're able to do, I remember I started in this league in 1992 when it was only, I guess, 7 or 8 years old. And back then it was all about the logo. It was all about the brand, the crest, everything. You always thought about Hockey East first and foremost. That has taken a dive over the last few years, and that will be something that will be important. But that's not something that a commissioner alone can do. That takes a lot of individual activation at the university level, and that's something that I think Steve Metcalf is going to have to work. It'll be a challenge for him, but he's going to have to work toward that early.
But he seems like somebody very well suited to make that happen. And with that, we'll wrap things up for this edition of USCHO Spotlight. We've been sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.